I was going to do a blog about coronavirus and how to keep yourself safe online at this most challenging of times, but recently I've become increasingly worried about something that's linked to the growth in surveillance and overreach in police powers. I apologise that this isn't an infosec video per se, but it does touch on infosec, drones and privacy. With the global crisis that is COVID-19, restrictions have been put on everyone's lives here in the UK to try to slow down the progress of the virus and stop our health service collapsing due to the volume of cases. These measures are necessary and in my personal opinion can be considered to be proportionate. I say proportionate, but what I mean is proportionate as to how I personally have observed them being implemented. You only have to look at Derbyshire in the north of the UK to see police forces chasing down dog walkers with drones, recording registration plates in car parks to check if someone's travelled too far. And we only have to look at the West Country to see police leaving notes on car windows misstating that the law is for 1 period of exercise per day. Now, anyone who reads the actual text of the laws will tell you that the numbers of times that one may exercise is not stated. Also, what's not stated is if you may drive to somewhere to exercise. When the UK's newspaper The Guardian spoke to the Cabinet Office, they clarified that there isn't anything prohibiting driving to exercise. Now, I don't have an issue with the law. I believe it's needed for the moment. What I have an issue with is police interpretation of the law. The police are there to enforce the law as it's written, not to try and enforce what they hoped to have been written. Of course, it also isn't helped when an ex-senior police officer goes on a radio show and announces that the police should use tasers and baton rounds to enforce compliance. Or police forces opening up special web portals where citizens can report their neighbours who may not be observing the law as the other neighbours interpret it as. Yes, in the UK there are now special reporting websites so that you can let the police know about your neighbour going on 2 periods of exercise or perhaps purchasing some non-essential groceries. These are trying times and I really hope that senior police officers will realise the damage that their officers' actions are doing to the perceptions of the police and reinforce with rank and file police officers in the UK we police by consent and we enforce laws as they're written. Lastly, I want to cover online privacy during this health emergency. Recently, I've seen people advocating the removal of any and all privacy controls enabled to combat this virus. Now, on the face of it, and to those who don't know any better, abandoning all sense of privacy as it may slow the disease sounds like a great trade-off. We've seen people volunteering to give up all of their data via a mobile phone app, people recommending video conferencing platforms that may have privacy concerns. Even the UK's Prime Minister using the commercial service Zoom for sensitive conference calls before the security services stepped in and established common sense. Recently there's even been a discussion to get the mobile phone providers to allow blanket access to mobile phone tracking data to trace infected people and who they may have had contact with. Taken in a snapshot, some of these measures seem to be proportionate, but long term, what then? This virus will pass, we will get to the other side and life will return back to normality. However, privacy once gone is gone forever. People's perception of normality, once changed, is changed forever. Before you use a service, as you did before the current crisis, think, what data am I giving away? Can I get back to where I was? Would I ordinarily give up this data freely? Returning to the topic of legislation, we've seen many times where legislation has been enacted for one purpose and then used several years down the line for another. We only have to think back to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act to see something that was brought in to stop terrorists and then was used against organised crime and has now been used against people allowing their dogs to poo on the pavement, against people trying to get their kids into the wrong schools. The list goes on. If a legal tool exists, it will be used, and history has shown it will probably be misused at some point. The legislation I talked about earlier, the rather snappily titled the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions England Regulations 2020, is deeply illiberal and should worry anyone covered by it. It's the most restrictive legislation enacted on the UK outside of wartime. Personally, and for the time being, I accept its presence as needed if the application by the police is proportionate and in line with the law as written. What I worry about is if this crisis drags on and the law becomes normality, police checkpoints become a normality, having to account for your everyday movements becomes a normality. What then? So that's all I've got time for. Stay safe, observe social distancing, wash your hands, ask sensible questions, don't take health advice from YouTubers, and remember, we will get through this together.